Stanford University.
My name is Dr. Tia Rich, and I have the pleasure of organizing the Stanford Contemplation by Design Summit, and I recognize some of you from the prior sessions in this year's summit. And today we are gathered to have the inspiration from Stanford's Senior Director for WorkLife Strategy, Phyllis Stewart Pires. And Phyllis brings to us a lot of original content for the work-life demands that we all are navigating here at Stanford. She came from the high-tech industry and distinguished herself through designing a program at Cisco and also at SAP. She also has worked here at Stanford with the Clayman Institute for Gender Research, and in 2016-17 received the Beyond Bias Fellow distinction. One of her unique programs that certainly caught my attention was a program called Babel, Back After Baby Leave Ends. So that's a sign of her creativity. We invite you to think about the core ARC framework of contemplation by design, the PEACE acronym of pause, exhale, attend mindfully, connect with yourself, nature, and others, and express. As you listen to what Phyllis is going to share today, as it ties into those skills, and she really builds upon that foundation and helps you to actualize it in your daily life. I'd like you to give her a warm welcome and a round of applause as I give her a small expression of gratitude. Thank you. Thank
you. Right. Well, hello, everybody. And I have to give credit where credit is due. The Babel title actually came from Mona Hartman, who's back there at the back door. She is the most creative member of my team. So I just wanted to make sure and say that right up front. So I am so glad to see some familiar faces and some new members of my community here at Stanford. And I have to say, doesn't it feel great to be part of community this week? And to just take a moment to pause and to contemplate. I'm going to be seeking other opportunities to do that during this week as well, as sort of life creates a lot of energy around all of us. So I want to thank the Contemplation by Design team for welcoming me back again this year. It's been a few years, and the program just gets better and better all the time. And so I hope you've had the opportunity to take advantage of not just this session, but more as well. So in the time since I've spoken at the Contemplation by Design week, I've put some more years under my belt here at Stanford. And I've had the opportunity to do a number of things that have put me in even greater touch with the Stanford community, with the challenges that people are experiencing with respect to work-life conflict, and then additional ideas, because this work is done by a collection of ideas from the people that are on this journey with us. And that's how we get the work-life integration tools that we need. So I'm excited about that. My team has done workshops and sessions like this for hundreds of people across the campus. We've done it for intact teams. We've done it for groups of different affiliations. We also have created something called My Working Life Circles, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and some of the curriculum and activities that we're going to engage in with together over this next hour come from the My Working Life Circles content. And so I'll point that out. They're actually a 6-month arc of people in groups of 6 to 8 peers meeting together and going on a journey of identifying how to gain greater work-life integration. And so again, you're going to get an hour of a 6-month journey that we're taking people on. But again, we'll talk about what that looks like. I've also, as was mentioned, I am engaged with the Clayman Institute, and I love the work that they do. I've also had the opportunity to serve on the long-range planning area steering group for the community. And that was an incredible experience and opportunity. Not only did I read many thousands of submissions, that kept us all very busy, but it just did give me another opportunity to have a view into how our community is feeling about the way they're experiencing Stanford. And then I've continued to lead the WorkLife Office, and we've had a very busy few years, a lot of growth in our programs, a lot of growth in the number of people that we're serving. And then I also have continued on my own personal work-life journey. And so I'm currently serving as the president of the College and University Work-Family Association, which is a group of my peers that come together and talk about how we're serving our various communities. And my dad walked his end-of-life journey, and that then resulted in my serving as trustee for my parents' trust, a very complicated, difficult experience for me and my siblings. And I had one of my 3 children go through a very difficult struggle with mental health. She's doing better now, but again, a very big challenge for my family, for my extended family. And then I was reminded in the midst of all of that of the importance of exercise and healthy eating, something that I wasn't doing a lot of, and so needed to kind of rethink about how I was going to integrate that into my life. So, and then I was just reminded, I was sharing with Tia, because our life was not complicated enough, we adopted a new dog a couple of weeks ago, and so that just threw everything into complete upheaval. Just when we thought we'd gotten, a couple things smooth sailing, we decided to adopt a new dog. So, just to tell you, I do thrive a little bit on chaos. So through all of those things, I remain a very deep listener and continual learner, and somebody who, as I mentioned, believes that while each of us walks a very unique journey, none of us have the exact same combination of dependence or responsibilities or ways that we engage with our community, but we can be of support to one another with the ideas that we have and that we come across that help us to think about this. And so, as I mentioned, I'm going to be using this opportunity to share lessons with you that have come from the work that we do in the community. I'm also going to share tips and best practices that I've heard from all the many people that I interact with, and then some that I use in my own life. And I also mentioned that we will be talking about my working life circles as a point of reference for some of the activities as well. So you've got a handout in your seat, or hopefully you got one as you came in the door, and if you don't have one, somebody from my team can make sure that you do get one. And I'm going to give you some options of how you interact with the activities that I have there. There might be a couple of times over the next hour when I'll invite you to talk to somebody close by you about something that we're working on. If you don't want to do that, that is perfectly fine. You may have come here thinking to yourself, I want to spend an hour and I don't want to interact with anyone. If that's how you're feeling, please just gently look down, and we'll take that as a signal that you do not want to interact with the person next to you. But what I'm going to encourage you to do is, if you don't want to share what you're doing with someone next to you, I'm going to have you snap a picture of it and maybe text it to somebody who's important to you in your life that you might want to share it with later. Or if you just want to sit here for an hour and maybe even not listen to a word I say, but just have an hour of silence, that's good too. So whatever's going to work for you. All right. So I'm going to put up what seems like such a simple quote, and yet I really believe is an important lesson for us to think about right at the beginning of this work that we're going to do together. So the lens through which you view the world changes your outcomes. Again, such a simple thing, but I think sometimes we forget how much that really is true. So one of the most powerful tools that we have found works for people in these sessions that we have, and both for their career and life journey, is something that we call reframing. So it's this idea of just taking the way that we are thinking about an issue or a subject or a topic and just finding a way to reframe that in just the smallest, simplest way can make such a tremendous difference. And I find for myself the ability to just pull myself up from that downward spiral that can sometimes start to happen when work and life come into conflict with one another can make such a difference in the way that I spend my energy getting ready for something, or even how I move through that conflict. So I'm going to give you a little example, and I'm going to tell you that I have dramatized this example slightly for educational purposes, but it might not be too far off from something that you've experienced. So when I got to this weekend, I realized I still had quite a bit of preparation that I wanted to do to get ready for today. And so one of the lenses, or one of the ways that I could have entered into this weekend was, oh my God, I have so much to do to get ready for Monday. So this means I'm not going to be able to spend as much time with my kids that I wanted to spend this weekend. And you know what? My husband is probably going to get super annoyed because the weekends are the only time we have any time together. And that means I'm not going to be around. And so I'm going to have to start negotiating with him. And then we've got this new dog. And so you know what? I'm probably going to have to just, if I'm really realistic with myself, Sunday night is the first time I'm going to have a chance to do this. I'm probably going to be up till all hours Sunday night. I'm going to be totally exhausted. I'm going to get there Monday, look like a wreck. I'm not going to be put together. These people are going to wonder why they even invited me to do this. You know, maybe I should just call Tia and tell her that, sorry, I'm out. So there you go. You know, that's a really lovely downward spiral that I was getting myself into, and I think I see some heads nodding. I think sometimes that's a way that we often can bring ourselves into even greater sense of conflict. So instead, I decided to intentionally say to myself, as I came into the weekend, I am really excited about the opportunity to be with people that I care about at Stanford, and share what I know and what I've learned from others. And there has got to be a way that I can figure out how to fit in what is not 32 hours of preparation, but is a few hours. And I'm going to think about what is most important to me this weekend and try to make a plan with everyone in my family so that I've got that time that I need to focus and that I've also got the time to spend with them. And I know that they're going to want to help me with that because they know how important this session is to me and to the people that I'm going to present it to on Monday. And so we'll work it out. And wow, I feel so excited about being there on Monday. That feels so great. So again, just a really small example of how if you can reframe the way you're thinking about work-life conflict or work-life balance or work-life integration, we're going to get back to those words in a minute, but sometimes it can make a tremendous difference in the energy that you feel and the way you're coming into a situation. So we're going to practice this technique a little bit. And by the way, so I just gave you those example of those two lenses. My weekend was much closer to number 2. It wasn't entirely there, but it was a little bit closer to number 2 because I was more intentional about that as I came in. So we're going to give this a little try. So one of the things that we find when I use the term work-life balance, and I put that out there into the community or into a group of people that we're talking with, here are the words that people most often say: stress, tension, disappointing myself and everyone, being pulled apart, being torn down the middle, impossible. Okay, those are literal quotes. Every time I do this workshop and I say, tell me what words come up for work-life balance, that is what people say. And so I think to myself, oh my gosh, I mean, so we've got a lot of people for whom that term is conjuring up these incredibly heavy, I'm not being successful with this feeling, And that must feel really awful then when you come up against a decision that you have to make to weigh and balance those two things, if that's the frame that you're coming at it from. So I want you to spend just a few minutes, and again, I'm going to give you choices of how you want to do this, but you have a little box on your handout, and I want you to draw a picture. You can use words if pictures don't work for you, and this does not need to be something that we're going to hang on the wall of the Louvre, okay? I mean, just really simple stick figures is great. And I want you to think about what would be the best possible definition of work-life balance, and what would that look like for you? And if you prefer to not use balance, so I don't use the word balance. So I'm a Libra, and we like the scales. And so what happens for me when I use the word balance is I think about I have to give from one, I have to take away from one in order for the other to work. That is a horrible image for me in terms of work-life balance. So I've used the term integration most of my career. Some people like fit. Some people love balance. So I want you to go for it if balance works for you. But so take a few minutes and draw an image, use words, but what would be the best possible definition of work-life balance for you? You're going to create a mental image. All right, if you're done drawing, if you want to find somebody close to you, it doesn't have to be someone that you know, and in some cases it's preferable that it's someone that you don't know. And just mention to them what your picture's about. And again, if you would prefer not to, so the hardest part is always after I've gotten you talking to bring you back. So I'm going to bring you back. All right. Thank you for those of you who shared with others. I'm glad that you took that opportunity to do that. This is work that often is helped if we share it and if we talk to others in our lives about it. So that was really great. And if you didn't, if you want to, as I mentioned, take a picture of it and send it to somebody. And then if you're looking for a great dinner topic conversation, this would be great. All right, so we don't unfortunately have time to hear all of the great ideas that people were buzzing about in here, but I'm going to share a couple that have come up out of the workshops that we've done. And then if you want to share your picture with me on the way out, I would love it. So make sure if you want to find me at the end and share it. So one of my favorites was this hammock visual that somebody came up with. So what she drew was two really strong trees and then a hammock slung in between. And what she said is, what it said to me was, I have this really strong tree-like foundation of my work and tree-like foundation of my life. And then I have this really wonderful, supportive, peaceful connection that I can go to and I can hang in that hammock. I loved that. So she now has that picture hanging in her office. Another one that came out of the workshops was, it was a single mom. And for her, what was really important was the imagery of a team. And that's what she felt was so critical for her with her children in the situation that she was in. And she got so excited about it that they created T-shirts for she and her kids. And so they wear their T-shirts around, which I thought was very fun and very, very cool to see that happen. And then one of the ones that just came up recently that led to a really important aha moment for someone was her imagery was, it was her holding a big bunch of balloons, helium balloons. And she said, what I realized as I was drawing it was I was the one holding all of the balloons. And so she said, what I realized is what I needed to do was start giving away some of the balloons to other people in my life. That would be one of the ways that I would feel less stressed about always needing to keep all of those things held so tight. So I thought that was another really, really interesting imagery that came up. And then, because we do a lot of talking to people here at Stanford, a lot of scientists and mathematicians and all that, we get lots of Venn diagrams. So, lots of people with the small circle and the large circle, and then realizing that that tiny little space in the middle gets smaller and smaller. So anyway, I hope that you are able to come up with an image that gives you a reframe on this topic. So now you've got a tool that you didn't have before. So next time you feel the welling up of work-life balance is crushing you under and feels like the evil slayer of your dreams and aspirations, I want you to try putting it through this different lens. So I'm going to share 4 techniques that we use in our workshop. You have 4 boxes in your on your worksheet, and you can just capture a couple of the ideas that I'm going to share with you. So these represent our values foundation, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these 4, but generally it's using a values foundation, focusing on small steps rather than a whole life overhaul, welcoming support and help, and being intentional. Okay, so we'll talk about each of those. So let's start with the values foundation. So we usually start the arc of our workshops and the circles with a discussion of values. And often our lives have become such a constant whirlwind and a constant bombardment of new information coming at us that many of us feel like we are in survival mode pretty much all the time. And we often can get to the end of a day or the end of a week and not really be able to say to ourselves, this is exactly how that week or day went, how I felt during that time, or even what I was able to accomplish. And so, it kind of reminds me, I'm sure many of you have had that moment when you pull into the driveway at the end of the day and you think, oh, that's weird. I don't have any recollection of exactly what route I took to get here. All I remember was leaving the Stanford parking lot, and now here I am. And I realized that my brain is so distracted and so full of other things that I haven't paid attention to the path that I've been taking. So I think sometimes our lives can begin to feel like that. So life is a constant series of decisions. I'll say that again. Life is a constant series of decisions. And each and every day, we have to make a set of decisions, large and small, that get us from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And those small moments are what makes up the entirety of our lives. And if you're making some of those decisions with a real whack-a-mole approach, which some days feels like that, then there's a greater stress in the moments where you're choosing between a work or a life and you're having a conflict there. And also the additive value of some of the decisions that you are going to be making over the course of that time, you don't get the advantage of that. So I'm going to give you a little bit I'm going to think about some of the decisions that I had to make today before I got here to be with you. Did I hit the snooze button? Did I hit the snooze button twice? Or did I go ahead and get up? Did I help walk the dogs with my husband and spend that little bit of time with him that he really appreciates? Or did I say, forget it, I don't have time today. You go ahead and walk the dogs, I'll help you later. Did I have more caffeine? Or say, okay, pot of tea, that's probably enough. Did I send a text to my daughter who I know is having a very difficult test today that she's kind of worried about? Did I remind my son to remember his PE clothes? I'm going to come back to that part of the story. Did I look at that email that I got from my boss very early this morning asking for something that he needs for a meeting at the end of the day today and reassure him that even though he wasn't going to see me all day today, I was going to get that thing for him so that he wasn't worried about it and I wasn't worried about it. So I'm sure if you went back and thought about your morning, you'd have your own list of decisions that you had to make, things that you had to think about and say, am I going to do this or am I going to do that? And, you know, you could just I could have just let the stress of the morning sort of sweep me along and make those decisions for me. And that is sometimes our default MO. Or I could leverage my values as a way to think about how to make those decisions. So let me give you an example. So I do place a high value on ensuring that my husband and I have time to connect every day. We both work full-time. We have 3 children, 2 dogs. So we have a lot pulling us in opposite directions. And so it really is something that we try to focus on, is that little bit of time to connect every day. The value I place on trying to fit in exercise, the value I place on my children being independent, but also knowing that I'm there to support them if needed, and the value I place on relieving the stress of the people who rely on me and setting expectations so that I'm not caught later by my boss rushing into my office as soon as I get back from this saying, I couldn't find you and I really need to make sure that I have that thing, which is of course going to accelerate my stress. So a couple of the things that I did is I did hit the snooze button once. Okay, I'm going to admit. I hit it once, but I didn't hit it 2 or 3 times. I did get up and go for a walk with my husband, and I did text my daughter. I did not remind my son about his PE clothes, and I'll tell you more about that story in a minute. And I did make sure that I sent an email to my boss to make sure that he could take a deep breath. So what we often find is that if people have not thought about their values in a while, sometimes they feel like they're making their daily decisions in more of this whack-a-mole fashion. So we encourage people to do the values exercise, and that there is one in your worksheet if you want to do that. You don't have to do it right now. Because one of the things we find is that people have often not done any sort of a values exercise for many, many years. And they also don't realize that your values change and they evolve, and they should. And so something that maybe you might have identified as super important to you 20 years ago is possibly not as important to you now. And so we do encourage people to take that time to do the really simple values exercise. And the way we do it, and what's in your handout, is just a big list of words, and you just circle the ones that resonate for you. And then if you really want to dig a little bit deeper, you go back to that list and choose the 4 or 5 of them that really feel super important to you. And again, this is not super scientific, but it is just something that can help ground you back into this idea of making your decisions based on values. So a couple of the examples that have come up from the workshops when we've done this is somebody ended up writing me an email that said, I really realized that I value nature and personal wellness, so I joined a bike club. And we go on bike rides every Saturday through nature. And that has really been a transformative experience for me. Another person said, I value connection and lifelong learning. So I have integrated a Zoom book club into my schedule 3 times a week. And another person said, I value cultivating creativity and self-reliance in my children. And so weekdays are now screen-free in my house. So it's just that idea of making the connection between our values with how we're spending our time and energy and how we're making those daily decisions that come up minute by minute. And so later today, when you need to make a decision about how you're going to spend your time or how you're going to spend your energy, I want you to think about, does this reflect a value? It might not. Not everything does. Not every minute is going to be this heavy value-laden decision. But if you can bring that forward to front of mind, there are going to be plenty of decisions over the course of your day that may be able to be reflective of your values. And then that cumulative power of feeling like you've made those decisions based in those values can really start to shift people's perspective. So that then leads me nicely to our next one, which is small steps. So often at the beginning of our workshop, we hear from people and they say, everything in my life is wrong. I need to change everything in order to feel differently about my work-life conflict. Everything about my work-life balance is screwed up. So I often, when I hear that, have to take a deep breath. And you know, what we've found is seizing the opportunity of some really small, specific steps can often have a much greater impact than people might imagine. So again, I'm going to give you some examples that have come up from the workshop, but you hopefully will come up with a couple of your own, either while we're here today or later. So I interacted with a woman during one of our workshops, and she said, my daughter is missing me a lot. And I've decided that I need to stop working. And that's going to be a huge, huge difficult thing for my family, because I really am the primary breadwinner, but I just am to the point of feeling so much guilt about the time that I'm not spending with my child. And so I said, okay, so first of all, is your child home all day? No, they're in school. Okay, so let's kind of think about that a little bit. And I said, what is something that your child really enjoys doing with you? She said she really likes playing games, board games. I said, okay, how much time does she need to play a board game in order to feel like she spent time with you? And she said, well, I don't know that. I said, well, how about if you ask her? So she asked her daughter, 15 minutes. Okay. So I said, well, how about if you identified 15 minutes that you could play a board game with your child, and I'm just going to suggest just try this for a little bit of time before you quit your job. And so, again, I know this sounds a little bit simplistic, but she came back to us a few months later and said, this has been such an amazing experience because it was that one small thing that I identified, that my daughter and I agreed on, that we found the time together and we've been doing it, and it's made a tremendous difference in how we both feel about our lives. And by the way, I did not have to quit. And I was very happy to hear that. So that's, again, an example of a very small step. Another person in our workshop approached her issue at the beginning and said, I am exhausted all the time. Okay. So I said, what do you think might help? She said, if I could just get 1 extra hour of sleep. So again, she wasn't saying I have to change everything about my life. When we began to just parse it down into what would be something that would make a difference. So she came back to us after a couple of months. She said, I've been very unsuccessful in getting a full extra hour of sleep, but I'm getting 30 extra minutes of sleep, and it's making a tremendous difference. And by the way, it feels great because I've accomplished something. The last example I want to give, somebody came in at the beginning of the workshop and said, my marriage is really suffering, and I'm actually to the point where I'm not sure that this is a relationship that I want to continue in. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking a work-life integration workshop is possibly not the best place for you to bring this issue forward, but we'll give it a try. And she said, you know, the thing of it is that we just really don't have a lot of things that we like to do together. And I said, okay, well, is there anything that you like to do together? And no, not particularly right now. I said, well, what's one thing that you have to do together? And she said, well, we have to walk our dogs. I said, okay, well, how about if you begin to walk the dogs together as just one way to have a little bit of time where you're interacting together as a couple? And she said, okay, I'm willing to do that because, you know, when you're walking a dog, like you can choose to speak to the other person that's walking next to you or not, you know, that sounded pretty simple. So, you know, I give these examples. These are real people that have gone through our workshop. And what these examples are is this idea that often what we'll do is inflate it into everything is impossible and nothing can be done. And sometimes if we break it down into that one tiny change, that one tiny step that we can take, that can actually make more of a difference than we think it might. And so that leads me into this idea of accepting help. So we often believe that addressing work-life conflict is something that we have to do alone. It's something that we have to somehow prove that we're capable of doing. It's something that we have to achieve. We have to get an A+ in, all those things that come up for us. And so I just find that that is really not true. And I think that often for some of us, if we can recognize the need and the opportunity to accept some help and some support, that can often make this journey a lot easier. And so some examples that have come up from the workshops are the idea of getting a meal service a couple of days a week. I will tell you that for me personally, that was really challenging because I wanted to feel like I could cook, I could get all this done. I really resisted a meal service for a really long time. It's actually been a fairly transformative thing for me in my life to have a meal service twice a week. Not something that I do all the time, but it did really allow me to step away from what I felt was the bar that I had to have relative to meals for my family and give me a different opportunity to have some additional time. We also often have people in these workshops identify accountability partners. So somebody that they can work with to help them accomplish their one small goal that they've identified. So if you walk out of here today with one idea or one small step that you're going to try, I really encourage you to find somebody in your life who can be that accountability partner or support for you. Because even just saying it out loud to someone, this is the goal that I have, this is the thing that I want to try, can often make a big difference in terms of whether we feel like we're going to be able to accomplish that. And so I think being willing to accept the support of others when it's offered is something that we often feel very challenged with. And so one of the things that I find helps me is if I think about the concept of paying it forward. And so the example that I like to give is when my children were younger, we lived on a cul-de-sac, and I was the only mom who left the cul-de-sac in the morning to go to a job outside of the home. And that was very challenging. But one of the things that I noticed was that by the end of the week, the moms that were working in the home with their children were really sick of those children by the end of the week. And I had this fresh, open house where the children had not been all week. And so I, over the weekends, would just throw our doors open and say, come on in, have fun, use our backyard, play with my children. And that added up a lot of points, to be honest with you. And so then when things like birthday parties at 2:15 on a Tuesday came as a regular part of my routine and I wasn't able to get there and get my children, I had all this reciprocity built up. And so, I know it might sound slightly calculating, but sometimes that's what we have to do when we are trying to navigate these things. And so I encourage you to make sure that your network is really healthy and really active and that you've invested some time. One of the things that's also important is to figure out what kind of help you need and who can offer that to you. So I think it's really important that we all have cheerleaders, that we all have somebody who tells us that we are really great no matter what. And that is different than your truth sayer. So you also need a truth sayer in your network, and that's somebody who will say to you, the hard truth of something that they might notice. But make sure you've got your cheerleader and your truth sayer, because those are two really important parts of your network. So that is going to lead me to our last little piece here, and that is about being intentional. So I personally have to literally have physical reminders to keep myself attentive to being intentional. And a couple of those are, I have a tea mug that has a quote on it that reminds me of my own personal power to have a positive attitude. It looks like Tia just gave me a new one that I'm going to be able to add to my collection. I have a stone that sits on my desk with the word breathe on it. And it is crazy how often I'm not breathing when I look at that stone. And so that really helps me. And I actually keep it on the top of a pile of paperwork, so that as I'm making that action of going towards the work that I need to do, I'm being reminded of being intentional with that. I keep a list of my children's most positive attributes in my wallet. And that is really helpful, because sometimes when I'm in the midst of a work-life conflict that is being caused by one of my children, having a reminder about the attributes that they bring into my life can really help calm me down. Be like, yes, okay, we're in this together. By the way, my son did not remember his PE clothes. And so I got the text as I literally was backing out of the driveway to drive here. Mom, I forgot my PE clothes. And so I had to reach back into my values and say to myself, okay, am I gonna lecture him about the fact that he could have remembered his PE clothes? And so, there's different feelings about this. Some people would say you should have just let him, not dress out for PE today. And I actually knew that I was driving right by his school. And so it took me 2 extra minutes, so I did take his PE clothes. And by the way, I got a very nice thank you text, which from a 13-year-old boy is a really important cachet. So it was, it was worth it. It was worth it. Sometimes you got to do those things. So then the other thing that I do is I do set intentions. And so I have a list of my 2018 intentions plastered a bunch of different places. I have it on my mirror in my bathroom. I keep it in my day planner. I keep it on the inside of my computer, things like that, just so that I'm being reminded of what it is that I set as my intentions. And if you've never done intention setting, I highly recommend it. It's a pretty simple exercise, and keep the list short, but I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that. And then my husband and I do something that I always get teased about how this is like the most unromantic sounding thing possible. And yes, it is, but it has, we have been married 27 years. So we do a 6-month check-in, and we go out to dinner and we say to ourselves, the last 6 months felt great because of these things, or the last 6 months felt really hard and crappy because of these things. And we would like the next 6 months to feel different in this way, and what are some things that we're going to need to work on in order for us to both meet those goals. So again, those are some of the ways that we set intention. So some of the suggestions that have come from the workshop are, each morning I set 2 to 3 intentions for the day. So maybe if I have a challenging presentation that day, I set the intention that I will try to be clear and confident. 2 days a week, I sit outside and read a book that I've identified as helping me to be intentional, or a gratitude journal or jar. I don't know if any of you have those. I have someone at my office that has a jar that is filled with little pieces of paper that are things that she is grateful for. And if she's having a moment of challenge, she can reach in there and pull out one of those pieces of paper. And it's just, again, just a really simple exercise that you can use. So often, I've given you quite a few ideas, and again, I mentioned that we get a lot of requests when we do workshops like this of tell me how it's done, tell me how to fix this. And I think what I'm hoping that you come away from is that there are many different approaches that you can use, and some of them are quite simple. They don't all work all the time, and there will be days when your hair is on fire. There's days when my hair is on fire. And there's days when I don't manage to remember to use a single one of these tactics that I have spoken about and get to the end of the day and think, wow, okay, that was a tough one. And then I try to make sure and remember that that is not a reflection of my entire being, my entire life. It is one tough day, and I will wake up the next day setting my intention. So a couple of the things, how do we influence our own ability to reframe? So negative self-talk is one of the things that we know from research is one of the most powerful and damaging things that can work against some of these techniques that we've talked about. And so I'm kind of a literal thinker sometimes, and my idea is sometimes we need to just tell that negative voice to take the day off. Thank you very much for your input. Now, I'm going to handle it from here today. And sometimes just that literal act of inviting that little negative voice to take the day off and not be present can sometimes be helpful. And then I also just want to remind us all that perfection is not the goal. I think that for those of us here in this Stanford community, that is a really hard thing to remember because we are surrounded by our own personal desires to be perfect as well as an atmosphere that encourages us to strive to perfection. And so that can be really tough. And so I think reminding ourselves often and regularly that perfection is not the goal. So then how do I influence others around me? So sometimes we've talked about a lot of great techniques, and then you may feel like you're going to be in a situation where you may want to try some of these things and it's not going to be well received, or it's not going to be supported, or it's going to be questioned as, you know, hey, wait a minute, how come you're rocking the boat and trying something different? And so a couple of the things are, make sure that you have shared your intentions and your values and your goals. So as I said, if your one small step is to get an extra 30 minutes of sleep, make sure that you're sharing with the people in your life why that's important and why you're trying to do that and how they can be supportive to you in that, rather than just saying, hey, I'm out 30 extra minutes tonight. Good luck with all those dishes. All right. And then how can I influence my workplace or my community? So this is a really interesting exercise, and I think we have some time to talk about this. So I think one of the things that often happens is we forget to think about the things that we do have some control over, the things that we have the opportunity to influence, but we do not have direct control over, and then the things that we do have the ability to be in control of. And I will tell you that one of the things we notice when we do this in the workshops is that people are always surprised when they go through the exercise of actually putting things into these circles. And they find that something that they thought that they had no control over, they actually do have a little bit of control over. Or sometimes it's good and healthy to be reminded of the things that you do not have control over, the things that you just cannot change. And so this is, again, an exercise that we encourage people to think about, and you have it in your worksheet. So if it's something that you can do a little bit later, we welcome you to do that. So again, in the center, you're going to say what I can control. The middle ring is what are the things that I can't control but I can have some influence over. And then the outside ring is what are the things that I cannot control or influence. So one of the examples that I love to give from someone that went through this exercise is they were feeling very challenged by the time at which they had to be at work in the morning. And it was really, they were finding it particularly challenging when it intersected with responsibilities for their children and their commute and all of these different things. And so we asked her to do this exercise, and one of the things she realized is that she had been making some assumptions about that time. And so she did some inquiry with her boss, and he said, well, actually, I don't know what time you do come in the morning. So maybe it's not quite as important as you were imagining that it was. And so she ended up being able to have a conversation that allowed her to have some additional flexibility in what time she got in the morning. But she'd been having the assumption that there was no way, that she had absolutely no control over that, when in fact she did have a little bit more control over that. That is not true in every situation here at Stanford. There are some jobs where you do not have any opportunity to have flexibility in that. So now, we're going to ask you to make one small commitment. And that's, again, I hope, in your worksheet. Yes, okay, last page of your worksheet. And again, this doesn't need to be huge. And it can be any of the examples that we've talked about today, or maybe your one small commitment is that you're going to finish doing the exercises in the handout. That can be it. Or that you're going to tell somebody tonight about this workshop and an aha that came to you as a result of being in this workshop. So just take a few minutes to make that one small commitment goal, and consider there's a couple of questions there on page 5 that you can dig into if you want to do that, and we'll take just a couple of minutes to do that. All right, I'm going to bring you back for just a couple of closing moments, and then I'll do some Q&A. I know I get you going. It's so great to be able to share that with somebody. So if you didn't get a chance to share and you want to, I'm going to point out 2 members of my team, Tess de Guzman back there, raise her hand, and Mona Hartman back there, and myself. We'll be standing at different parts of the room. If you just want to share what your commitment was with somebody, we're happy to listen. So just grab us on the way out the door. We're also always interested to hear what people come up with as a result of hearing this, this content. So before you go, I want you to take one last look at that picture that you drew. So go back to the picture. And I want you to look at that and make an intention that as you go through the rest of your day, when you hit moments of feeling the welling up of the conflict between work and life, and this feels so challenging, put it through that lens of that picture that you've drawn and that gift that you've given yourself to have a different lens, a different view on this idea. So I hope that I've given you some things to think about today, some inspiration on this topic. I'm happy to hear from any of you. We do individual consultations all the time at the WorkLife Office. People contact us and say, I'm just really stuck and I feel like I need to talk to somebody about this. So we're happy to do that, happy to be a resource to you. I think I have our information there. So we really want to make sure that you know that we're there as that resource. Tia.
Do you offer these workshops at people's departments in their buildings, or are they all offered in one location?
So we do them all over the place. And let me bring up the question about do we do them for intact teams? Yes, we have, but with the caveat that the group needs to be large enough that people are comfortable sharing some of what we just shared and talked about, because they can the topics can get a little personal, and so we don't do really small intact teams. We also, though, have done it, we've been asked to come and do it for, a group of postdocs, or come and do it for a group of graduate students, and we've done it in that way too, so that then people are in sort of similar work and life stages. That can sometimes be really effective as well. We've also done it for all hands. Sure. Yep. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions, but I also know if people need to get going, that's fine as well. Yes. So send us an email. So Caitlin Asdarian, who is my partner on the circles, is having a baby in March. So we've had to push the relaunch of them into the fall. But yeah, send me an email and we'll get you on the list.
Let's give a round of gratitude.
Thank you very much.